Today is the third day. We're going to complete our EGM, and I think first presentation is Vilma is the part. She's going to present the as part of the first presentation from Peru, and she's already here, and she's waiting for Ismail. So I think we are planning to shift to the second presentation. So from ADB colleagues, they are going to present about measuring agriculture parcels area in the Cook Islands using global positioning system. And I think Anthony also part of the team. I have seen their activities in the Cook Islands, how they use for a surveying purpose. So I will give the floor to ADB colleagues if you are comfortable to start the presentation.
Okay, so good day everyone. So today we'll be sharing with you our work in the Cook Islands on measuring agricultural parcel areas using Global Positioning System or GPS. So our presentation is divided into four parts. We have the overview of the Asian Development Bank's Knowledge and Support Technical Assistance 9646, which supported the Cook Islands Ministry of Agriculture in this project. We also give an overview of the land use and land cover mapping of the capital Rarotonga Islands, which we did with the European Space Agency. And then next, we'll discuss about the technical assistance for the 2022 Post-Census of Agriculture Enumeration Survey for the Cook Islands. And then lastly, the next steps for this project. So to give you a very brief overview about the ADB Knowledge and Support Technical Assistance 9646 or Data for Development Phase 2, the main objective of this TA is to enhance the capacity of the national statistical systems of selected developing member countries in support of the Sustainable Development Goals. The intended impact is to increase data-driven monitoring of development goals and evidence-based policymaking, and the expected outcome is to enhance the capacity of the national statistical system to meet the data requirements of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Now, these technical assistance has several expected outputs. We have the first component on agricultural statistics or the sampling frames component. We also have the national accounts and statistical infrastructure, labor statistics, data visualization, anonymization and exchange, and knowledge sharing to enhance the quality of official statistics. So our team here at ADB is working to support the achievements of the outputs under the agricultural statistics or the sampling frames component of the TA. Country supported, we have Armenia, we have Cook Islands, and Lao PDR. So the focus of our presentation today is the ADB TA 9646 implementation in the Cook Islands. So the Cook Islands is one of the countries which recognize that they need support on agricultural statistics. So the focus of this collaboration with the Cook Islands is the conduct of a post-census validation activity to fine-tune the results of the Census of Agriculture, which they conducted in 2021. Now, the Census of Agriculture is the main source of agricultural statistics in the country, which is done every 10 years. The main implementing agency is the Ministry of Agriculture, and we are also working in collaboration with the Statistics Office. To give you an overview of the activities that we have conducted in the Cook Islands, we have conducted a training on agricultural area measurement using GPS in October of 2021. Our participants are from the Ministry of Agriculture. This activity was immediately followed by a pre-test in the two islands, Atiyu and Mauke. We also have land use and land cover mapping. This was done in collaboration with the European Space Agency. So while the Ministry of Agriculture is preparing for the conduct of the census, so we took that opportunity to also collaborate side by side with the European Space Agency. And then just recently, we just conducted a mission to the Cook Islands to conduct the enumerator training for the Post-Census of Agriculture Enumeration Survey, or the PES. And in that, there we have collaborated with both the Ministry of Agriculture and the Statistics Office to develop an updated frame for the conduct of the PES. And then after the training, we also had a pre-test in selected EAs in Rarotonga. So the Census of Agriculture was implemented by the Ministry of Agriculture between December 2021 until March of 2022. So ideally, the PES is conducted 6 months after the conduct of the census. So right now, the data collection for the PES is ongoing, and we expect to complete the data collection by mid-October. For the PES, the main activities are first, the listing of all agricultural holdings in 12 enumeration areas in the capital, Rarotonga Island, and then the agricultural area measurement using GPS of all parcels operated by the holding in selected EA. So the training on agricultural area measurement that we conducted in October is mainly to prepare the enumerators to conduct the data collection for the PES. Okay, so as mentioned earlier, we did collaborate with the European Space Agency for the land use and land cover mapping in the capital, Rarotonga Island. So our main partner, our main collaborators are Everis of Spain, also Greenspan and Worlds from Space. So they are from the ESA consortium. So the collaboration is divided into several work packages. First objective is work package 1, which is developing the classification scheme based on the UN land cover and classification scheme. Work package 2 is Copernicus satellite data processing, which includes several tasks. The first of which is the overview of the Copernicus satellite data available for the Cook Islands, covering the whole time series. So in the second part of this task, the Sentinel-2 data was used to describe in greater detail, including the pre-processing step necessary to use this data in the LULC classification. Then work package 3, this is the use of very high resolution data, data processing and map generation. So again, this work package includes several tasks. The first of which is the concise overview of all VHR satellite data available for the Cook Islands. And the necessary steps needed to use this data in the LULC classification. And then work package 4 is the expansion of coverage that is applying the procedures and methodologies produced and tested within the work package. Work package 5 has the following tasks: evaluating the seasonal change in land use based on Sentinel-2 data, also evaluating the seasonal change in land use based on the very high resolution data, and then the comparison and combination of the Sentinel and the very high resolution land cover results. Okay, so study area for the collaboration with ESA, as mentioned earlier, it's the capital, Rarotonga Islands, which constitute about 60% of the country's agricultural production. Timing, we have Epoch 1, which is from December 2020 to March 2021, and Epoch 2, Epoch 1 is for the wet season, and the Epoch 2, April to November 2021 is for the dry season, for the determination of any seasonal variation. So classification scheme is again based on the UN land cover classification scheme, source imagery, Sentinel-2 and worldview data. And the methodology is extended and tested on Aitutaki Island, which constitute about 20% of the country's agricultural production. Okay, lessons learned from the land use and land cover mapping in Ra and Cook Islands. So first, the targeted differentiation of various land cover during and within the season requires individual very high resolution data to determine the boundaries of management units, as well as multi-temporal satellite data to enable continuous monitoring of the entire study region or short time intervals. So one of the main challenges is that the comparison of wet and dry season does not produce meaningful results due to the prevailing cloud cover in wet season. So therefore, a change detection between years is seen as more useful. So also the lack of ground truth data hinders the validation of change maps, since the accuracy of the single classification map cannot be properly assessed. Next, the small scale nature of the landscape elements and the continuous change in management often results in mixed pixel, which make it difficult to unambiguously assign pixel to a class. So initial results showed that the high complexity of land cover in the coastal area in Rarotonga lead to high levels of falsely identified changes in land use and land cover between wet and dry seasons. And then also in areas similar to the Cook Islands, so data with lower spatial and higher temporal resolution should be considered to distinguish changes between and within season. So this evaluation is based on the difference between NDVI values of each pixel within individual segment. So we have this basic assumption that if an area undergoes a significant change between the wet and dry season, so it could be marked as managed vegetation. Okay, so going back to the PES, so the main focus of our collaboration in the Cook Islands is to understand the scope of the PES. So the target is to cover all agricultural holdings in the capital, Rarotonga. So the objective, again, is to understand the coverage of the recent agriculture census, whether all the identified agricultural holdings are enumerated or there was severe undercoverage. We also wanted to compare the area estimates, that is the farmer self-reported area estimates, and the one from the GPS area measurements. Instruments used. So again, we use the land use and land cover maps for improving the sampling efficiency. This is the one produced by through our collaboration with the European Space Agency. We use GIS, in this case, QGIS for survey planning, mapping, and dissemination. And then for the data collection, the survey instruments were programmed using survey solutions. However, along the process, we realized that it would be more efficient to set appointments and do the listing interviews using telephone interviews. And then the field interview also using CAPI. And then for the area measurement, we use a handheld GPS receiver for area measurement. Okay, so developing an updated frame for the PES. So the population census was done prior to the ag census. So the initial plan was for the ag census to use the listing from the population census. Now for the listing activity, the population census includes all holdings engaged in any form of agricultural activity. So regardless of the volume or the value of production. Say if the household said that he owns 3 fruit trees, so they will include that in their list of active agricultural landholders. So however, for the ag census, the Ministry of Agriculture has this threshold for identifying an agricultural holding. The farmer must be operating a 64 square meter of land or must own a certain number of trees to be included in the list. And since the listing from the population census was not available at the time of data collection for the ag census, so the ministry decided to use their list from the 2011 listing and their farmer registry, which include the list of farmers receiving support or assistance from the Ministry of Agriculture. Now, from this information, we surmise that there is a potential undercoverage of agricultural holdings because, first of all, they are using the list from 10 years ago, and a lot has happened over the past 10 years. So maybe some of the households have transferred to another island, or some has converted their land for other purpose. And then for the second one, the farmer registry, we also receive report that not all farmers are receiving support from the agriculture ministry. So that is mainly our objective for conducting the PES, to provide evidence as to the quality of the main statistical product, which is the census of agriculture, but not really intended to assess the correctness of the census results. Okay, so the first thing that we've tried to do for the PES is to establish a standard definition of an agricultural holding. We have here non-agricultural, so if the holding has not grown any garden crops during the reference period, which is 2021, that is considered as a non-agricultural. Minor if the holding has grown crops during 2021, but not more than 64 square meters. Semi-subsistence if the holding has grown more than 64, but does not sell most of their agricultural produce or mainly for their own use. And then commercial if the holding has more than 64 square meters and sells most or majority of their produce to local or to export market. So we're trying to also cover in the PES those who are into semi-subsistence, which we believe were undercovered during the agriculture census. Okay, improving the sampling efficiency for the PES 2022. So for this survey, we use a stratified one-stage cluster sampling approach. First is we use the land use and land cover maps to determine percentage of agricultural land per enumeration area. So this is the one produced by the European Space Agency. And then next is creation of 3 optimal stratum based on percentage of agricultural area within the EA. So we have high agricultural, medium, and then low agricultural area. And then we did a systematic selection of EAs within each stratum order by number of crop households. So this is determined by the 2021 population census, which we got from the Statistics Office. So to illustrate, so first we have the the image on the left, the land use and land cover map produced by ESA to determine the percentage of agricultural land per enumeration area. So we converted this into this file, the one on the right, and then we created 3 optimal stratum based on the percentage of agricultural area within the EA. So those in green have high a concentration of agricultural area, yellow and medium, those in orange or white or gray, low agricultural areas in these EAs. And then systematic selection of EAs within each stratum order by number of crop households. So as mentioned earlier, we got the list of from the Statistics Office from the most recent population census, and we used that to select the EAs or to help us with the listing activity. So methods for capturing area measurement in the PES, self-reported using the application and survey solutions. We also have a digitized on tablet with satellite imagery, and then tracking parcel boundary with GPS receiver. So Pam will show us a video of taken during the pretesting exercise in the Cook Islands for the tracking of parcel of individual holding. Okay. So we realized during the pretest that we need the farmer to come with the enumerator to make sure that we are capturing the correct boundaries of the parcel. So I think in this example, the land is fallow, but in 2021, which is our reference period, this was planted with crops. We also trying to get for those areas which were followed during the 2021 cropping season, but used to be utilized for agricultural production. We also try to cover those because we are also trying to get all the potential areas or areas that has a potential for agricultural production. So our experience in Cook Islands is different because we used to work in with the ministries of agriculture in Southeast Asia, wherein the parcel is under a single management and the cropping pattern is more organized. So in here, you'll see that the land or the parcel is used for different purposes or different crops. So in addition to the area measurement, we also tried to capture all the other characteristics of the agricultural parcels during the PES. We have the geography, parcel boundaries and location, number of individual plots within the area, characteristics such as land tenure, land use during the reference period, the list of crop grown, presence of multi or intercropping, post-harvest management, method of planting, number of corners and individual markers, also the slope of the parcel. We also try to capture environmental conditions at the time of the data collection. And then we have the method of transport, how the interviewers was able to reach the parcel, and then density of tree cover and access to other to health and other infrastructure. So the data to be collected from the PES will be used to produce knowledge products and solutions on the use of GPS for land area measurements, survey operations techniques, and the use of satellite data to identify agricultural areas. So we're hoping that through this study, we'll be able to help other countries and their if they're planning to implement a similar activity. So for the next step, so we realized during the mission that the Ministry of Agriculture would also need additional support to enhance their capacity on survey methodology, which includes, among others, questionnaire design, sampling frame construction and maintenance, data management and analysis, including preparation of metadata and data archiving, data dissemination, and sample design and analysis. So capacity building in this area would allow the ministry, since they are mandated to conduct the census every 10 years and also to do sample survey at least every quarter, to address future challenges they may encounter, especially in the provision of relevant and reliable statistics that would lead to further formulation of sound policies on agricultural sector. We'll be releasing a handbook on the use of GIS for survey, and this will be accompanied by a massive open online course on the use of GIS for survey. We intend to publish and launch both of these knowledge products by 2023. The main report of the PES 2022, so the team will be working on this immediately after the data collection, and hopefully we'll be able to share the results by 2023. Analytical papers for the ISI and ICAS, both in 2023. So in addition to the main report, we're also planning to do additional or supplementary analysis using the data collected from the PES. Coherence analysis with other administrative data sources. So the National Statistics Offices is not the only agency within the country or within the Cook Islands that requires statistical capacity building. We also need to support or to provide support to other government agencies holding relevant data in enhancing their knowledge on statistical methods and innovative opportunities. So we're planning to also do that in the near future for the Cook Islands. And then also the potential expansion of the methodology, use of unmanned area vehicles or drones for agriculture area mapping. So this hopefully will enable continuous continuous monitoring of the entire study region at a shorter time intervals. And then also to expand the methodology to other islands within the Cook Islands. So our collaboration with ESA already covered Aitutaki Island. So we're also planning to work on the other islands in the country to be able to capture all the agricultural holdings in the entire country for this exercise. Okay, I think that is my last slide. So that ends my presentation. Thank you so much to both FAO, Ms. Anguita, and also AIT for giving us the opportunity, the venue to share our work and ADB. The data collection for the PES is ongoing, but please rest assured that we'll be happy to also share the results with you as soon as available. If you have any question, half of our team is in this meeting, so we will try to address those in the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, for the wonderful presentation, compiling all the activities. And also, I think especially at the end, telling the way forward that what kind of knowledge product, other trainings coming up for other people to engage in 2023. So I will open the floor for questions. So any colleagues want to go? So I will take maybe 2-3 questions with the time limitation.
Thank you. I have a short question. Regarding the utilization of land cover in the post-enumeration survey, what are the benefit of this land cover map to measure the quality of the agricultural census?
So the main purpose of using the land use and land cover map is to enhance the sampling efficiency for the PES. So first, we use this to determine the percentage of agricultural land area per enumeration area in the entire Rarotonga capital. So we're trying to use an area frame design in this for this one. So yeah, that's the first one. So we use the land cover map produced by ESA to determine the percentage. And then from there, we created 3 optimal stratum based on the percentage of agricultural area. So since we suspect that there is a severe undercoverage of the agricultural holding in the recent agriculture census, so we thought of using a different approach so that the possibility of undercoverage would be lessened. So that's the reason why we use the land cover map for the first stage for the sampling for the PES.
Okay, basically for determining the sample location.
Not really, but to determine the agricultural areas in the capital.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
all the agricultural area. So from there, we identify the EAs which has the most number of agricultural or the most percentage of agricultural area. And then we select the EAs. Yeah. That's our basis for the stratification. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. I think Vidas Ismail make sure that she's satisfied. Sangeeta, you want to raise some question?
I think Guida had her hand up earlier. You've already got your answer? Okay.
Yeah,
So I actually had more of an observation that I wanted to share with colleagues. Often when we're looking at this work from a GIS perspective, we're looking at ground truth data or survey data to train, test, and validate the models that are used to interpret images. But what I've also heard from colleagues who work in national statistics offices, and more so ministries, often there can be incentives for either enumerators or farmers to under or overestimate key agricultural variables. And this particularly comes from the farmer side, this introduction of a bias when there's a concern of taxation. So I've also heard national statistics offices like the Philippine Statistics Authority say that sometimes the satellite imagery is actually used for validating survey data. So the reverse of what we often think, and it seems to me that the presentation that Anna Christine just made on how GIS is used is an example of a more scientific rationale for using GIS remote sensing to validate survey results, because that's what post-enumeration surveys are about. They're basically validating the results of an agricultural census or a population census, and having either a repeat survey in a smaller area with maybe a bit more rigor is one way, but certainly using technologies like GPS handheld devices, which again rely on remote sensing and earth observation, is another way to do the same thing. So I just wanted to make that observation that we see a situation where the remote sensing or earth observation data validates survey data.
Thank you, Sangeeta, giving more insight into the discussion. Any other colleagues having a question or any opinion? Yeah, I think seems not. I think I'm planning to move to the next presentation. And if you have further questions, I think you can chat in the Zoom. So I think Anna a colleague will try to address your concerns. I think we having difficulty with get connected to Ismail, but his colleague is here, Wilma. So Wilma going to take over the next session, and she's going to share the ground truth data collection using S3 product, ArcGIS Survey 123 in Peru in their recent activities. So Wilma, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Vilma Guaya. I work in the International Potato Center. I am biologist. And then I presentation about the growth through data collection with ArcGIS Survey 123 in Peru. The agenda is an introduction to ArcGIS Survey 123, Survey 1234 in practice, collecting ground through data in Peru, live and quality and analyze. Fourth, applying to typed documents with blank space for insertion or requiring information. Many industries, many needs. Therefore, I use in different sectors, forestry, agriculture, management, and others. This is the fourth for ArcGIS Survey 123. This is the fourth for ArcGIS Survey. You construct or you build the form for the different surveys. And then you have a statistics part. Why Server 1234 used from a mobile device of the web is the installed, nothing to install in the web, sharing social media, mobile work even if offline, and using Android and Windows. This is the example for use the Survey 1234. With Survey 1234, you can collect several information, example, email, website, number, date, calculation, map, photos, drawing, audio. I think it's very complete. With Survey 123, you collect many information. This is the example for use the Survey 123. Okay, with Survey 123, you have a compulsory question, and then you have many information about the plot. In this example, the people walk around the plot and then is drawing the plot. This is the example in Malawi. The people collect information in different fields in 554 fields. The typical use for Survey 1234 is crowdsourcing, on-site file data collection and interviews, collecting harvest data, mapping field boundary using Survey 123, and then documentation, potato varieties, and then in Filipina, interviews. And then I talk about the experience in Peru. This is my work in Peru. I understand the distribution of potato varieties in southern Peru. Peru is one of the countries in the world that had more than 2,000 ancestral varieties of native potatoes. Diversity is conserved in farm and in communities for subsisting use. It is a highly valued heritage. The organic market for mixture of native potato is huge. The International Potato Center is promote the commercialization of native potatoes. Using survey 123, we conduct a study to understand what potato varieties are in use cross in certain Andean communities in southern Peru. We interview 300 potato farmers to understand what variety they grow and where. Our results were comparing against a previous study by Cesar Vargas Calderon, published in the 1950s. Our study took place in 3 districts of the province of Paucartambo in Peruvian Andes, Escolquepata, Paucartambo, y Chayabamba. This is a very remote area with most communities living about 3,000 meters in elevation and up to 4,500 meters. A survey 1234 was configured for use in discontinued mode. Don't use internet. It includes more than 200 questions grouped in 3 components. First, basic information. Second, Vargas checklist. Third, cultivar diversity sample at heart. Training people was equipped with tablet and dispatched to interview potato farmers on site. Upon completion of the survey, data was sent to CIP for analysis. Basic information is the general information about the farmer, family, and plot. The survey starts collecting information about the farmer, member of the family, and characteristics of each potato field. General information about the current campaign includes the source of the seed use, day of seeding and harvesting. This section includes several repeat groups. Repeat are a useful feature. We use then the collection information about all members of the family, as well as detail of each potato fields. We also may use the automatic calculation to help complete the form more quickly. For example, to calculation total plot. Since some family and farmer has been interviewed in the past, we pre-load the form with much of the contact information too. This saves time during the interview. The second is the Vargas checklist, detailed description of potato variety. The survey also includes detailed questions aimed at understand the exact potato variety used, their geographic distribution and frequency. In the 1950s, Cesar Vargas Calderon is a prestigious botanist, wrote a detailed paper describing potato varieties in southern Peru. We upload the entire list of varieties from the Vargas study into survey 123 and use this information for a comparative analysis. This helps us understand what varieties are being lost, new ones and changed in use and in distribution. The second is the cultivar diversity sample at harvest. It's crowdsourcing on-site field data collection and interviews. During the sample, along with variety names and quantities, we use survey 123 to take over 1,000 photos to document the harvest. This information is very important because it helps us determine the conservation status of each variety. The other method is the 5-cell participative exercise. A participative exercise to identify the variety of potato planting and loss. The 5-cell exercise is used to gather community knowledge and practice with the participation of women and men is very important. We ask the community to group potato varieties into 5 cells. Each represents a well-defined growing practice. This information was documented in a separate survey 1234. Finally, I talk about what is the lesson learned in this study in Peru. Good for design is key for success. Don't start collecting data until you have done a pilot. Test your initial design with real people and real conditions. You need to ask several questions. Are you asking the right question? In the right order? In the language ambiguous? Are used the correct list? Are all lists complete? Second, is people make mistakes? Plan a workflow for people to amend survey already sent. Use lists whenever you can. As opposite to free text, lists help you collect more consistent data, avoiding typos. Repeat. Use repeat because I think it's very important. A repeat is a group of questions that can be asked multiple times. Very useful, for example, to compile a list of all the plots on for the farmers. Requiring question and data validation rule are key to better quality data.
Thank you, Wilma. So we had several technical difficulties and your colleague was not joining as well. Thanks for representing him and then completing the presentation. And I think she presented a quite good content. And I think we, from Asian side, we really get chance to listen from other continents. So I think it's a good opportunity for everyone. So I will open for questions or any other comments. Yeah, Sangeeta, I appreciate your insight. Yeah.
I actually just wanted to compliment both of our speakers today, both the presentations. I think all of the presentations yesterday and today were really, really insightful. In terms of my own thinking as more of a traditional statistician, it certainly helped me to see how ground truth data is collected, what some of the additional variables are. We've had an exchange in the chat box of the two of the variables that were collected in the Cook Islands post-enumeration survey by the Asian Development Bank, which are tree canopy and slope. So I think as we're sharing this, I'm getting a lot more rich insight. So I just wanted to again congratulate all of our colleagues who participated in these meetings and shared their experiences. I don't really have any questions right now.
Thank you, Sangeeta. I think we can get started with the second session. Sangeeta, you are ready.
So thank you very much, everyone, and welcome back from the break. We're now at the towards the end of our EGM. As you know, one of our objectives was to have a discussion about core variables for ground truth data. And in the process of developing this survey in collaboration between FAO, regional office in Bangkok, and the Geoinformatics Center of AIT, we realized that the core variables really depend on what it is that is the objective of the use of the satellite data itself. So you would have seen that during the course of the survey, there were questions related to the use of ground truth data for crop identification, for land cover mapping, and for crop area estimation. These were provided separately. They're probably not an exhaustive list, but it was to start this discussion. And of course, the results of our discussion today in the survey are going to be reflected in a paper that the two organizations will draft together, a discussion paper that hopefully can feed into a broader discussion to be led by the FAO's Office of the Chief Statistician on standards and methodologies behind the collection, use, and dissemination of Earth observation data, one component, of course, of which is ground truth data. So that's really what we've been sort of leading towards for the survey and for the next discussion. So with that, I'm going to invite my colleague, Anthony Burgard, to present a high-level overview of the survey results. Again, we are respecting confidentiality even in this fora to make sure that there's no privacy considerations that are breached when we present the results. And hopefully this will also help us have that discussion on what these core variables are. So Anthony, if I could invite you to please bring the presentation up on the screen and I'll pass the mic to you.
Okay, thank you, Sangeeta. So first of all, before I begin my presentation, just like to thank everyone for your time to respond to the survey. I really appreciate all the efforts made. As of this morning, we have received 9 responses from the group. But hopefully we'll be able to receive a few more of your insights as the day goes forward. We'll be sure to incorporate those responses ultimately in the final discussion. Okay, so here just try to pull a few of the graphs and the figures from each of the questions that were presented within the questionnaire just to begin and start our discussion. So the first thing is what the objective of the survey was just to kind of get a better understanding of how ground truth data is used for agricultural statistics within our region, and what are kind of the use cases, and ultimately what are the core variables that are used for each of those use cases. And also looking in the other theme of what are the standards and guidelines of how this data is disseminated and used by other researchers, both by remote sensing colleagues and statisticians. And as Sangeeta mentioned, we hope to use these results from this survey to compile into a discussion paper to help inform on the methodologies and guidelines for ground truth data moving forward. So in total, as I noted, we've received 9 respondents over the course of the last 2 days. We'll go through each of the, kind of summarize the discussion points for each of those questions. So looking at the group as a whole, we note that around 2/3 of the group do have some experience in using Earth observation data to produce crop statistics. And we received a number of responses from a wide range of agencies across the region, including things like Ministries of Agriculture, international organizations such as FAO, ADB, and the Pacific Community. We look at research organizations at the national level, as well as academia. So looking at the kind of the distribution of the responses by the wealth and diversity of countries across the region we have present here, we'll note that we have a lot of responses from Southeast Asia as well as the Pacific, noting Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia, South Asia, India, and also the Pacific, and also our colleagues coming in from South America who generously joined us here this evening. So I've been as the presentations have been going forward, I've been trying to update the list of core variables here that have been listed by you as either essential, important, and nice to have. Due to the limitations of time, I've only been able to do this for at least the first set, meaning the variables that are used for crop identification. So here I just wanted to present 3 graphs here. So each of the graphs represents the number of responses that are noted by you, whether each of the variables are noted as essential, important, and nice to have. So let's say we look at the first graph here in the top left corner. So these are the count of the variables where you've noted where they are considered essential. So the top 3 here, things are like crop name, crop photo, and the date of data collection. However, as we move down into the order of importance, like looking at which the variables that are not essential but important, we look at, apologies, the formatting of the graph is off, but we also see that, typically when we're looking at crop identification, crop name is usually one of the higher items that are prioritized by you, the expert group.
If I can interject, just for a recall, that it was only possible to select 1 of 5 categories. So this presentation ignores the non-applicable. It ignores the don't know responses. So it only uses the first 3 categories. And the reason you'll see things like GPS coordinates listed in the second graph important as having no responses is because it's either been evaluated as essential or nice to have. So the zeros don't mean that that particular variable is not important. What it means is that it was categorized in another group.
Yes.
To you, Anthony.
Thank you, Sangeeta, for that very important clarification. And then finally, I guess some of the variables that were considered nice to have for crop identification were things like the agroecological zone, the GPS of the corner points, and the administrative boundaries. Okay. So you'll see the kind of a nice demarcation of the different groupings. What are kind of the key variables that are essential are not necessarily top items that are important, nice to have. So we have a nice kind of distinction of what is essential. Moving on to the next use case is the crop area and yield. For this particular graph, I was only able to update for the 7 responses that we received up to yesterday night. But we'll see very similar patterns in this particular use case. So for the example, in the essential variables, we see again that crop name, date of data collection, and GPS coordinates come out as one of the top 3 essential variables for ground truth data. Looking at across to important variables, we have things like what is the crop season, the presence of intercropping, and the presence of irrigation. And, oops, sorry, I think I skipped over one slide. Apologies for that. So let's just move back to the crop area topic. So for the essential items in crop area, we see crop name, date of data collection, GPS coordinates. In terms of importance, we move on to see things like crop season, presence of intercropping, and presence of irrigation. And finally, some of the top nice to have items may be things like the agroecological zone, GPS coordinates at corner points, and the administrative boundaries. Again, we see a little bit of consistency across the different use cases between crop identification and crop area. And then finally, the last use case that we asked about was the use of ground truth data for crop land cover mapping. You'll see a little bit of a difference here, where if you look at the top 3 variables for the essential items, you'll notice things like crop photo, GPS coordinates, and crop name. In terms of the important variables, we have things like the presence of irrigation, the presence of intercropping, and the administrative boundary. Oops. And then finally, the nice to have category. Here we have a little bit of repeat of the agroecological zone, GPS coordinates of the corner points, and the administrative boundary. Again, we'll come back to this through our further discussion. This is just kind of a way to help summarize some of the responses that I've received so far, just to get you familiar with the responses that have been provided so far. In addition to these 14 variables that have been listed within the questionnaire, the respondents have also provided other responses. So we noted things like, in particular for crop identification, you'd also like to see variables on the growth stage of the rice crop, if it's able to be specific, the age day after planting. This is very similar for the use case of crop area and yield. We're also looking to add variables on growth stage and also productivity estimates such as biomass and plant height. And then finally, some other variables suggested for land cover mapping, which would be the age of the plant as well, in particular in paddy field and plantation area. I also want to pull an example from our recent presentation by our colleagues at the Asian Development Bank for their presentation on the Cook Islands, where they also noted some additional variables such as the number of plots within the area, land tenure, land use, the method of planting, the slope of the parcel, and the density of tree cover. So with that, I'd like to kind of open up the discussion one by one, going through each of the use cases. So maybe at this point would you like me to hand it over to you, Sangeeta, or would you like me to come back to this later?
Let's start the discussion.
Okay.
So I think Anthony raised a really important point, even though we haven't compiled all the results yet, and I'm hopeful that more individuals will submit their responses. We did see in crop identification that the 4 variables that came up repeatedly were the crop name, the date of data collection, the GPS coordinates, and the crop photo. And my understanding is the reason to have the date of data collection GPS coordinates is if this is feeding into AI algorithms to interpret satellite imagery or other remote sensed imagery. Those two variables are absolutely essential. And then understanding what the crop is, if the purpose of translating the imagery is to identify crops, validating what that crop is in situ is also really important. So I just wanted to do a quick roundtable, not just on these essential variables, but if you felt variables other than these were essential, I'd like to get your thoughts. And just to make sure everybody has time, if you don't mind, I would like to do this as a little bit of a roundtable. I will start first with anyone that's open to raising their hand, so I don't put anyone on the spot. And I give other colleagues a chance to think about these results since you're seeing them for the first time. So is there anyone who'd like to volunteer to comment on variables other than these first four that they feel that are essential for crop identification? Since I don't see hands up, Dr. Manzul, if you're online, would you mind if I put you on the spot and ask for your thoughts first?
Yeah, I think this particular questionnaire, I think this is whatever is asked, I think majority of the people say it's either essential or important. And the having this data sets for a particular crop, and we are asking quite comprehensive questions. And I personally feel that this is sufficient for the as far as ground truth is concerned. And in terms of remote sensing, also, for example, I'm picking up say one example, one of these parameters, say season. So many of the time, say particular location, they can grow more than one crop. Then season that it become very important. And from remote sensing point of view also, for example, if you take up a rice, so there is a 3 months and it will NDVI will go up and then suddenly go down. And whereas you look for say sugarcane, then NDVI will be constant for almost a year. So I think those are the variables from remote sensing point of view, very, very important to even this from this variation, you can also even tell what kind of crop it could be. So I think this is very, very important kind of confirmation of our the crop and of course also we talk about location, and we also know the what are the measure crops in that particular locations. So I think this is very, very important. Also, it's somewhere talking about agroecological zoning. So that's also we have that information. Then we can also looking at the agroecological zone, what kind of measure crops are being grown or more suitable. And remote sensing also will be from remote sensing. Then if we have that knowledge, it will be more easy for us to interpret or analyze those crops there. So basically, what in nutshell, I think these are the information whatever in the ground is. This will help us to extrapolate this information or link to the remote sensing. Once we can establish this link, then whole things become quite easy to observe a large area. So that's the basic, I think, most important aspect of this ground data and remote sensing data. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask our colleague from OAE Thailand?
Yes, sure. Okay. For my office, because for the questionnaire about the topic on the crop identification, my comments in the other for the specific ghost state online crop or maybe another crop is maybe useful because we want to reshape for the what on the time that we have the survey, what the cost state that should be, and maybe we can estimate the yield in the area, because some area maybe have the disease or pest or maybe natural disaster. So maybe when you go to the field survey, we can look at the structure of crop, and maybe we can roughly for the estimation of the yield production in the area, because OAE have the other field survey, not only for the satellite imagery, but for the rural kit episode that have for the volunteer or the agricultural volunteer in the local area to monitor the crop in this area. So for this, we compare the information together and make sure that we correct interpret for this crop interpretation. And also we use for the overall accuracy, because normally we interpret the satellite imagery for the crop classification, and we want to make sure that we classify correctly. And I think that for other information, other detail on the crop name, crop data, date of data, the correction and GPS coordinate, it's very useful to know the exactly crop in the field survey, and we can compare, maybe we can compare with the farmer registration, because the other useful information is the farmer registration. As you mentioned that Thailand is facing problem too, because for the private sector or maybe for the private sector is not registered to the farmer registration, because they did not want any subsidy from the Thai government. So in some cases, satellite imagery is very useful to monitor agricultural area. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much. I see Rizatas has her hand up, so I'll turn the mic over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Sangeeta. So I think I agree with Dr. Mansur. I think it's very important to support the ground data collection, because for crop identification, I think in my country it has to be done periodically, because there is some land conversion. It's very fast. So it means if we do the traditional ground data collection, I think it's will time consuming, and also we need many human resources, and also very costly. So I think remote sensing data is very important to be used, but we still need to be have some suggestion from the statistician, what kind of requirement that we have to do if the remote sensing data still have give the not fulfill accuracy, because we know mostly of the accuracy analysis and cannot give more than 90%. We know that, we know all that, but we still have to increase or improve our analysis, our model to get that requirement by statistician. I think we need to work together between remote sensing people and also statistician to have some standard methodology to get data collection integrated with the remote sensing data. I think that's my opinion. Thank you, Ms. Sangeeta.
Thank you very much. And I particularly note that comment that we need to think also about accuracy and how we measure accuracy, you know, whether it's using the traditional statistical approach of CVs and indicating what range of CVs are acceptable, because that also helps determine the sample size for any kind of ground truth data collection. So that's very well noted. Thank you very much. Let's move on to our colleagues from the National Bureau of Statistics, China.
Basically, we have no other opinion on this plan. So, we will give our response to you as soon as possible.
Thank you. I see Dr. Manzul has his hand up.
Yeah, so thank you. And just to follow up, Sasa comment, I think she mentioned about this kind of coordination between statistics and department for this ground truth collection or some kind of collaboration is essential. But I have seen in Indonesia yesterday, you have millions of ground truth data. I would say it's a gold mine. I have not seen that kind of intensive ground truth data. So I think there's a big opportunity for Sasa, for you and your agriculture state to collaborate. And also, although you are also working on this remote sensing area, maybe we can also kind of like to get together and make some kind of, I mean, with this kind of data set, we can do some kind of a standard. Okay, this should be the way, and to proceed for better attain better accuracy and more reliability. Of course, I mean, no country, I mean, many countries will not have this much resources to collect this one, but at least this data we can play with so that we can find the optimum one and recommend to the countries. I think this could be a very good research and kind of can develop some practice tool or in the future. I mean, the Sangeeta is my idea, but I think this could be a very, very good possibility in future.
Let's come back to that when we start discussing dissemination. So just to keep this on the topic of core items, that's a really nice segue into introducing Rita to also share your thoughts in terms of what you think are core, what you think are essential, and why.
Okay, thank you. Actually, for statistics, I understand why Miss Sasa asked that question, because yep, we haven't used the result of the remote sensing for the official statistics. Right now, we developed this methodology for comparing the sensor or survey result, not for the official statistic, but the possibility, yeah, it can be done. Maybe one day, I don't know when, but we are going to do that. And we collecting this ground we do this ground truth data, yeah, mainly for the land cover classification, and this is the first project of Statistics Indonesia to do that, and unfortunately I cannot explain more what next we will do, what we will do to explore this data, but right now is only for the land cover classification. Maybe I can explain. Yeah. Is that answer the question?
Yes, it certainly does. And we will have a later slide that talks about essential variables for land cover. So maybe at that point, if you want to raise your hand and add more, that would be very helpful.
Okay.
So let's move to our colleagues from Peru. And Ahmad, I do have to apologize that I didn't give you the 5 minutes. I'll try and do it at the end of this discussion, in case you wanted to add anything more on the potato project in Peru. But in the meantime, I'd like to get your thoughts as well on what you feel are essential variables for crop identification, what you think are important, and maybe a bit of elaboration on why, if the variables that you feel are essential are not already in the top group. Over to you, please.
Hey, yeah, well, I am in the US in California. I do have no additional comments on this discussion you are having. I'm definitely not an expert on this type of topics.
Thank you, Ismail. Let's go to Ratna, Miss Ratna.
Thank you, Ms. Sangeeta. I'm Ratna from BBS, Statistics Indonesia, actually from the Directorate of Food Crop Statistics. Well, actually, from my division, we collect the data still using the area sampling frame. And we also try to develop the remote sensing to check the data, but yeah, as the Miss Wida said before, that the accuracy is still low, especially when many of land in Indonesia is small land, so it's quite challenging to develop the remote sensing. So maybe we need more training to develop remote sensing in our country. And regarding the cost of area sampling frame, yeah, as we know, it's quite pricey because we need a lot of surveyor and we collect the data every month. So yeah, maybe in the future we can combine the data collection, maybe using the remote sensing, and in the difficult area we can use area sampling frame. But yeah, we still try to develop that.
Thank you. Let me turn to SPC. Lewis?
Yes, well, I'm not definitely an expert on agriculture census. I'm a bit surprised about seeing that GPS coordinates. You know, for me, the most essential would be GPS coordinates and making less relevant any other geographic related information such as admin code, name, state, which are likely to be extracted from the coordinate. Just to highlight a point about the standardization of the data, I think that it's important. The way we this because it's pretty similar as the way as we design data collection artifacts on population and on census and surveys. So yeah, it would be great if among countries we could standardize those ground truthing surveys as much as we can, so that countries can use others ground truth countries with same context, environments, weather, type of crops, so that you can make use of those inputs in order to, you know, the same way and in order to make some variables comparable as well. So some kind of, not in detail, but some kind of general standardization that would be, I think, a good idea to start thinking of. Over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lewis. Two really important points that Lewis raised that I identify with as a statistician is some of the variables that are listed as essential, regardless of the response to them, can actually be obtained without a ground truth survey. They can be obtained from a secondary source. So he mentioned that if we have GPS coordinates, that can be overlaid with maps that already have administrative boundaries, which do exist. They can be overlaid to identify all the location variables. So the survey doesn't necessarily need to actually collect those variables. Of course, it saves time and data integration if they are collected, but that makes them important perhaps, but not absolutely essential if the GPS coordinates are there. The other point I noted Louise raised, and we've been having an internal discussion on this, is having some kind of common template or standard. So many of us have developed surveys in which we ask for these questions. And I found within FAO, when we actually have, a survey template, that's not an absolute must, but that's a starting point. It's a little easier to standardize data collection. It's a little easier for organizations to adapt that to their own context and to make sure that some standardization is available, but it doesn't have to be surveys that are identical. So two very, very good points, Lewis. Thank you for that. I'm going to ask if we have any of our ADB colleagues who'd like to add.
I think I'm not sure if this was included in the essential crop photo, if I may add. In
Yes.
this day and age, we're also trying to implement or use algorithms to identify crops on the basis of labeled images.
Yes,
So
it's in fact in the group, the top 4 variables. So we
okay,
took good
sorry.
note of that. Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
And
Thank
thanks for
you.
the explanation as well. Any other colleagues want to add before we go to the next slide? So,
Hello.
There's a hand raised for Rita.
Yeah. Thank you.
Rita, please
Sorry.
go ahead.
Yeah, I think in my opinion, what miss in this data item is the accuracy of the GPS coordinate. Because yeah, in our project and for the ground truth data, we limit the maximum of the accuracies up to 20 meters.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll
I
take
don't
good,
know.
we'll
I
take
think
good
that's
note of that. Yeah, that is
okay.
essential. That is absolutely essential to note. Anthony, could you take note of that we should elaborate on the GPS coordinates in the document we write up, that we talk about accurate GPS coordinates instead of just GPS coordinates?
Yes, absolutely.
And we can describe what accuracy means. So if I've missed anyone, please do raise your hand. Otherwise, we're going to go to the next slide. I do want to make one more point though before we do. If in fact the 4 or 5 essential variables are the top ones that are in the slide, the crop name, regardless of what classification system we use to identify crop name, the crop photo, the date of data collection, accurate GPS coordinates, one of the things that I would note of these 4, they're not revealing any information about an individual, a household, or an enterprise. So potentially, these do not violate privacy. I'm saying potentially because I need to validate that that's in fact the case, that it doesn't create an issue for an enterprise. I don't think it's going to be private information what a private sector commercial farm produces and where they produce it. It's probably going to be more when we start getting into area and yield that there's some sensitivity. But with these, if they are in fact not private information, then it's very easy to exchange and publish just the core variables. When we start adding the additional variables, I think it depends. But I would say even some additional variables may not be problematic. When we start getting to GPS coordinates of corner points, of course, we're getting into area. So this is one of the reasons we divided the use cases the way we did, because if we do want to start sharing information, if we do want to start disseminating it, all of us will be subject to privacy policies or privacy laws. And so distinguishing the use case means that for some use cases and publishing only the core variables may not have privacy as a consideration. So I just want to leave that with you. And then if I could ask Anthony, if you'd like to go to the next slide. And perhaps for this, Anthony, I'll let you lead the discussion and ask our colleagues for their inputs.
Sure, thank you, Sangeeta. So I just want to remind everyone for the slides on crop area and land cover mapping, we've only been able to reflect the responses of the initial 7. But more or less, based on the additional response I received this morning, I think the trends are still more or less accurate in terms of the top variable items that are listed as essential, important, and nice to have. So maybe similar to our previous discussion, just like to, maybe we can just note the differences between what are the requirements for crop area and yield as opposed to crop identification, or if there's any difference at all. So maybe we can have any volunteers from the group here to help start us off. I see a hand from Shafiati.
Want anybody else to be a volunteer, but maybe I can start it. Actually, for youth estimation using remote sensing is already assessed in my my last office, because I just moved to another agency. We already have discussion with BPS National Statistic Agency to use this remote sensing data, but actually the authority to publish the data is the information. Information is BPS, but we Ministry of Agriculture also have need the important data of this yield estimation, because also the crop area, because we need the data spatially to estimate or to planning our need of the fertilizer, also seed, and also pesticide, and then the water, because we actually we have information system, but it only used for internal department, because we need the spatial data or map to plan that requirement, that the need of the input of the agriculture, because a statistic agency cannot give any map information to us. So we have to already have some discussion with the staff or the statistic or with BPS to use remote sensing data for estimate the yield. But we start to the remote area, or the area that less accessibility of to have data collection. It's difficult to have data collection, so maybe we have to give more discussion with BPS for next maybe for next meeting of our meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I'll invite next Dr. Mansoor. You have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So this two crop area and yield. So basically, from our survey, we know a few points of that particular crop. So then we extrapolate to our remote sensing images, and now, as we have been seeing, so 80–90% accuracy of crop area is achievable with present technology or data quality. But in terms of yield, I think it is coming from this agricultural statistics department, and say the best thing is that if this yield data we can get at the lowest administrative unit, then I think that will be very, very helpful to better, we can link with the remote sensing data in a better way. But if you get a large area yield, say one district or province, that may not be, that variation from one place to other place in yield may not be reflected. So I think having this kind of yield data with lowest administrative, where they collect or do the crop cutting experiment will be very, very helpful for our remote sensing interpretation. Yeah. Over. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mansoor. Just to both points raised by both our original commenter from Indonesia and also yourself, yield estimates usually require us to bring in crop cutting techniques to assess the yield at very local levels. And oftentimes crop cutting is a very time-consuming and resource-intensive task. And as noted by our colleagues in Indonesia, it's also sometimes very difficult to access particular areas and get that data back to the office. But now I see a hand from OE. I'll hand over to you.
For this topic about the crop area and yield, for the crop area, for now, I think that we have the Office of Agricultural Economists have several methods to recheck and publish the data. For example, for the satellite data and for the list frame survey, socio-economic and other things. However, for the crop yield estimation, for now, our office just only used for the crop cutting experiment, and we suffer for the previous that the officer did not correct the coordinate of the parcel that they have cutting. So for now, we have the how to say, we have the regulation or something that command that officer should be correct the paddy field or cassava field could get the XY coordinate. Yeah. However, we think for this year, we OAE have the project to using the satellite data for the yield estimation. However, we based on the in-situ measurement, for example, biomass or plant height or water depth, and for the leaf area index. Yeah, and for now, we think that and based on the vegetation index, just only maybe for the NDVI. However, for the crop area and also yield, in the Ministry of Agriculture and Cooperative, it have the discussion via the local into the ministry. So for the remote sensing data, maybe involved into the two process. For the local that, for my division that interpret the satellite imagery and recheck and have overall accuracy to make sure that the data is correct for the area. And then for the regional office already also classify the agricultural area, and then we send the result to my office to check. However, in the local area, maybe in the provincial level or maybe the regional level, when they have the some confuse on the some area together, we go to the field survey, go to the real field survey and check this is correct or not for the area for this province, and then they pass to the Secretary General of my office, and then pass into the ministry level. Yeah, for this kind is the process of the crop area and crop yield in our office. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Those are very important points. It's very difficult getting to accurate GPS coordinates. We have some similar experiences working in the Cook Islands and trying to make sure that we use the right instruments in getting that accurate measurement. And also the important point of involving local office organizations as they know the area and the field and the vegetation best. Thank you. I see a hand from Sangeeta.
Yes, as our colleagues are commenting, I'm starting to wonder if we're stretching ourselves too thin by making this about crop area and yield, because a crop area in general will remain relatively constant over a growing season, but the yield can change even on a day-to-day basis. You know, if you have a heavy rainfall, you can have damage and loss. If you have pests, you can have damage and loss. There's so many reasons why yield can change from the norm, either positive reasons or negative reasons. And that means that if you're going to use satellite imagery, you have to have very dynamic models, whereas most yield models, I think, are taking multiple inputs. So it may be worth instead dropping the yield from this and rather noting in the draft document we'll put together that crop area is an essential input into yield estimates, but discussing all the other inputs are beyond the scope of the initial document. And I think that makes for something that's a little bit more effective for now. When we get into the yield estimates, I know there's already published documents on methodologies, but this also starts involving not just GIS experts and statisticians. It starts involving people with expertise in plant protection, in agronomy, et cetera, et cetera. So if nobody objects to that, I would propose we do this when we write up the results. So I'll do a check for hands, and if no hands are raised, then we'll drop the yield from this discussion. I think this also addresses the comment that that's been raised by Rizatas as well as Manzul and Prachi. Rizatas, do you want to add anything?
Yes, thank you. I think for make the standardization of methodology, we have not only to involve the statistician and also remote sensing people, but also we have to involve the person like agricultural one and also other related institution that have background to give some maybe some suggestion to for this standard methodology, because like crop yields, maybe we need to add some variable, because my experience, there is actually in theory we can do biomass with can be derived from satellite data, especially SAR data, but the result is cannot get a good accuracy. I think there is some variable have to be involved to the model to get the more to get higher accuracy. I think that's my opinion. Thank you, Ms. Sangeeta.
Thank you.
I see another hand from OAE.
Because I forgot to have the maybe some concern on how to use the satellite imagery, because in Thailand the paddy field is look like small patch, and maybe I found that it maybe have some misclassification. And for the other two factor that maybe influence is the rice variety or crop varieties, because it's maybe influence on the light yield. Some area is below, on some area it may be high. So I'm concerned about the variety of crop. And for the other factor is about the irrigation system. It may be influence on the yield. So just only for the two factors. Thank you.
Thank you. And for adding those 2 points of the crop variety and the irrigation. I'm also noting the time for the meeting. So maybe we'll just take one last question from the group if there are any, but if not, maybe in the interest of time, we move on to the next slide. Any other comments on this point? I don't see any hands, so we can move on to the next topic, which is the use of ground truth data items for land cover mapping. Sangeeta, would you like to discuss this, or would you like me to continue?
I'm going to let you continue because you're doing such a good job.
Okay, thank you. All right, so just like in the previous topic, just want to open the floor to any comments, concerns about the types of variables that may be unique for land cover mapping, or any other further considerations that are maybe different from either. Yes, we have a hand raised from our colleagues in Indonesia.
Okay, sorry. Actually, I still waiting for another person that have comment. Actually, land cover mapping is very important in my country, because my country is very large, and that's consists of the land, and also have a very big area of the sea. And actually, we have to do the land cover mapping we decide to make land cover or update the land cover mapping within 3 or 5 years. And this one, but until now we have paddy field mapping, the standard paddy field mapping in 110,000 scale. It's a detailed one. It actually it cannot be done only by ground truth data ground data collection. It have to use remote sensing data, but actually we still have to convince the public. So you have to give more. If I say that the accuracy is very important to establish for this methodology. I think that's my opinion. And we also have to map another land cover like estate crop, soil palm crop, and other crop. And until now we still don't have it. And we know in ongoing to do this one. But one more remote sensing data is very important to be used for this mapping. Thank you.
Great, thank you. It's very interesting to see that Indonesia has committed itself to producing a land cover map every 3 to 5 years. It'd be interesting to see kind of the use cases, how you use it. But I do notice some other hands, so we'll move to Sangeeta.
I just wanted to follow up on the comments from our colleague in Indonesia. in terms of how we document this, I think it'll be important to have that context that was mentioned, the importance of land cover mapping and its various uses, the importance of remote sensing in generating land cover maps, so that then we can position the ground truthing as not as an alternative, but a validation. Because the uses are broader than just yield estimation and area estimation. We use land cover maps in various types of statistical surveys just to identify where our target populations reside. So I think even indicating those uses for this particular item, for each of the items, but in particular for land cover mapping, I think it's going to be really important.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Do I have any other comments from the floor on this particular point? I understand it's a big topic. Land cover mapping is kind of one of the essential underpinnings of our remote sensing activities in terms of trying to understand kind of the broad sense of how land is used, not just in terms of agriculture, but in terms of like urban planning. And I guess I have a hand from Vida.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. Maybe I surprised that the land cover type, there are some respondents feel the land cover type is the important one, not the essential one. Since this for land cover mapping, I think it should be the essential one, not the important one. That's my opinion. Thank you.
What do you think about the variables? I noticed the essential and the important and nice to have. The focus of the variables seems to still be on crops, but we also note that land cover is a bit of a broader topic. Right? What other variables would be important in looking at land cover mapping in general? I understand that when you kind of do like sampling for ground truthing points, you try to get a good distribution of ground truth data points from all the different classification classes.
The GPS accuracy is still important in my opinion, to add in this essential.
Any other comments from the floor before we can also do kind of a round table just to get some further comments from other people. Maybe we can seek some advice from our colleagues in the National Bureau of Statistics of China. Do you have any thoughts about land cover mapping and the variables required for it?
I should mention, if there aren't any additional comments right now, this isn't the final opportunity. We are going to draft a discussion paper, which we'll share internally. It may take us a few weeks to get that fully reflected. We'll share it with all the group for your comments so that we can make revisions. And I'm going to propose that we also do some country examples. So for example, for the land cover, we'll follow up with you, Vida, on the work that you're doing. We'll follow up with OAE on some of the work you're doing on rice area estimation, and so forth, just so that we can give examples to readers. We are a relatively small group, so this discussion paper will help us reach a larger group in Asia and Pacific, and then potentially after that, my headquarter colleagues will take over and reach other regions as well. With that, I do see a hand up from Rizathas in Indonesia.
Okay, I think we have to differentiate between land cover and also land use, because in my country, maybe also other countries, we have a land use by what is land use they call or they define as paddy field, but for land cover, maybe someday they planted by paddy, but some area may be planted by sugarcane and another maybe by maize in a different season. Maybe we have to differentiate the definition of land cover and land use, I think.
Excellent point. Very excellent point. I think in line with that, we should also see if there are any international classifications or standards. We should also mention what those are. Of course, many countries will elaborate those standards into finer disaggregations, but at a minimum, the international classifications for crop type, for land use, for land cover should be mentioned in the discussion paper. Thank you, Rizal.
Comments on this. Maybe we can move on to the final part of the presentation, which nicely segues into what can we do as a group to improve the standards for the collection, use, and dissemination of ground truth data. So with that, I'll kind of give you sorry, before we get to that, just briefly show you some of the answers for how organizations in this meeting typically collect ground truth data, so mainly looking at in situ data collection, but also acquiring ground truth, open source ground truth data and imagery through satellite and drone sources, and also surprisingly through agriculture censuses and surveys, which is very nice to see. In terms of the data collection use, we see a lot of the organizations here are collecting in different ways, looking at paper forms, using mobile data collection applications, using GPS devices, and also some are beginning to use drones and satellite imagery for this ground truth data as well. Okay. So what are some of the limitations that are noted by the group? You'll see that access is still a very difficult issue. A lot of the data that we really need is very granular data, and it's often restricted. It sometimes is incomplete without coordinate data, only available in maybe aggregated tabular form. It could be unreliable. It may not be available at the frequency and consistency that we need it. We also note that the resolution that is sometimes available of the data sources that we have is not adequate for the purposes that we need. And also in terms of this ground truth data is, as we noted many times, is very expensive to collect, and it requires a lot of coordination across different agencies. So in terms of dissemination, how do we get this ground truth data out there for researchers like yourself to be able to make use of this data? So we noted a few different sources. In particular, in this group, they've noted the use of GitHub as a possible source, the FAO hand-in-hand geospatial platform, ResearchGate, Mendeley Data, Harvard Database. These are all very academic type sources, as well as some open platform sources such as like GitHub and the FAO geospatial platform. Okay, and we also noted one of the most important avenues, which is the official website or official letter of the organization that's releasing the data. Going back to our conversation about improving standards and guidelines for the collection of ground truth data, I'll just quickly go over some of the points, like looking at improving the collection application, the tools that we use for the collection, such as the mobile data application or maybe the software that we use to facilitate the process. Important to take note of the type of cropping, specifically mixed cropping, intercropping that's present in the areas that we're choosing to survey. There is also a need, a request to establish international standards and guidelines, maybe through a UN task force, and how do we harmonize the data, these types of data that can be useful for the wider community. Also in the same line of how do we coordinate among country stakeholders and trying to make sure that the data that we collect, because it is expensive, and how do we make it as useful as possible to all those groups involved. And some of the ways that we can do that is probably by sharing questionnaires, sharing the tools and techniques for across the agency so that everyone has a good understanding of what is being collected and how we can use it. And of course, we'd like to, once we have these tools, it's important to test them and make sure that they are usable for all those involved. In terms of using ground truth data, again, I think a lot of the discussion is very similar to the collection. Basically, it comes, one of the biggest concerns is trying to get access to the data, making sure that the data that is collected is available to the wider community. And you'll notice some other things, the call for further establishing international standards, the use of greater technologies, and then greater knowledge sharing between all the different groups. And then finally, what can we do to help in disseminating this ground truth data? One of the the recommendations here is probably introducing a standard for ground truth data so that in bringing in multiple views from different agencies and how to harmonize our efforts. Maybe possibly introducing anonymization techniques so the data that is collected is able to be shared without risking the privacy policies of many of the national statistics offices and statistical producing agencies at the country level. Finally, in line with this, we can also try to bring up these issues further in seminars and trainings to make these issues much more known and kind of introducing the use cases that are required that can come as a result of the collection of this ground truth data. So with that, I will hand it back over to you, the group, to have maybe a discussion about what you think about some of these points that were raised through the questionnaire. Any volunteers for any immediate reactions from that? I know it's a lot. But if there are no immediate reactions, of course, we can invite your comments by email, and we have to have follow-up conversations in the future. And we look forward to seeing you furthering this discussion. So with that, maybe we do have some input. We promised some time to our colleagues from Esri. Mr. Ishmael, if you'd like to have the floor for a few minutes just to give you some final comments and some experiences.
Sure, I will try to be brief because I know it's pretty late, but I really appreciate your patience. I definitely got my Outlook calendar today totally wrong. So that's why it was 1 hour late. Can you see my screen?
Yes,
Yeah.
so I should mention, we've only got a few minutes and your colleague has already gone through the slide. She's already presented the tool and the survey. So you may want to focus on things that you wanted to drill down on.
Yeah, absolutely. So you listened to Vilma and how she used this application called Survey 123. The intent of my presentation was simply to present another view of the tooling. This is a tool essentially to create digital forms. And I think the discussion you just had was actually quite interesting in that sense. In fact, while you were discussing, I thought it's like, oh, I'm going to put a survey together with the specifications that you guys had, like collecting the date, the location with the location accuracy, the crop type, the photos, and the comments. So, it's a tool that basically allows you to visually create digital forms to enable data collection. And that's really what we wanted to talk about. Like, how can we create these digital forms easily so you can collect data from computers, from mobile devices, or even web browsers, and then bring all the information together for analytics, filtering, and dissemination. The tool basically, once you configure the survey, allows you to collect the data over the web, so people don't have anything to install, although this is not practical for the work that we do, because a web browser, while you are disconnected, it doesn't work. But you can also download a mobile application where you can download the surveys and work even while disconnected from the network. In fact, from the mobile app, you can connect a high accuracy GPS receiver for more accurate locations. There are many different types of questions that you can add into this. People do very complicated things, but from what you discussed, quite frankly, you really need the simplest the form, the easier for people in the field. So you don't want to overcomplicate things. And you can see here an animation, with basically how it works. You basically drag and drop the questions that you want to add, and you configure the logic. Logic for data validation rules, for example, you can say, I don't want a point if the accuracy is not better than 20 meters, right? Or I don't want you to specify a date in the future. You can build this logic visually into the form. So, that's basically what I wanted to display. Much of these features, I think you really don't need like tools to organize questions side by side or, multiple pages. It doesn't seem like you need multiple pages. This is actually an ECAS field mapper survey that we developed recently for the NASA Harvest program, which has conditional rules to hide and show questions, as needed. Multilingual surveys, this can be important in some areas where you have people speaking different languages, because you don't often have a lot of time for training. You may want to actually develop surveys in different languages to collect data more efficiently. These are screenshots of data validation rules, like you can flag a question as required, you can build rules, you can collect information under the covers, such as what's the horizontal accuracy of the data you're collecting, how much time the survey was open, who was the user opening the survey, what device was used to collect the information. And this is super useful to understand the quality of the data that you are collecting. As I described, you can use external GNSS receivers. You can digitize the boundary of fields, simply walking, along the boundary, if you like. You can also collect the point or center of the parcel. And you can build real-time dashboards, which is very important to understand what is wrong while the data is being collected. So very often we wait for weeks for the data to come in, and then we realize, oh, this area was not covered. Oh, this person didn't collect data correctly. By having this connection with the real-time dashboards, you can see on the fly what people are doing. And you can give them a call and say, hey, you guys are not covering this area. Hey, you are not collecting data correctly because you are not following these rules. This screenshot is from a field data collection effort. Again, we did with NASA Harvest for ground truth data collection in Malawi. They did this very recently. And these dashboards were super critical, really, to get the work done quickly. And these are some photos of people using the surveys for different purposes. This is the Philippines National Census Office, the guys from Peru. Vilma was presented about this. This photo is from Malawi. So that's in a nutshell what I had to present for you.
Thank you so much. And just a reminder, we'll try to share with the presentations with everyone after this. So with that, maybe we'll hand over back to Sangeeta for the final close.
Yeah, I apologize. We don't have enough time to ask our colleague from ESRI a lot of questions, but I am going to propose a couple of things. We've seen different data collection tools. We've seen in Indonesia, and I think in part it's because of the size of the country and the size of the statistics office that they often develop in-house tools. They have in-house CAPI tools. They have in-house data collection tools as well for this land cover survey. In general, FAO tends to promote open source, and we tend to train on open source unless we're asked specifically by a government otherwise, and it's within scope. So you saw our colleagues at AIT when they did the ground truth survey in the two areas of Thailand, two districts of Thailand, they use Open Forest, which is a FAO source. The ESRI source is a commercial source, but I do want to make two really important statements. A lot of national statistics offices around the world do use commercial sources for various aspects of data collection. So it's not unusual that even the participants here would be interested in knowing what's available. So I think that's important. The other thing I'd mention, and I'm going to go out on a limb, I may get my wrist slapped for this, but I'm still going to go out on a limb. ESRI is rather unique, in my view, in that they're one of the rare private sector organizations that have a division of official statistics. And I think they've deliberately developed this because they work so closely with governments. And so they not only work with other private sector organizations, it's not just a profit-making organization, but they are very sensitive to what official statistics means. And they do bring, as any commercial firm would, value added in the product. So it's not that they're charging for something that you can get for free. They're actually bringing huge value. So even comparing their ArcGIS to QGIS, there are more layers already embedded in their software. In comparing their survey, translation is already embedded, which it won't be in most open software. So I don't want to dismiss the role of private sector tools, technologies, and organizations. And I think if we could write this up, some of the alternative modes of data collection, I think it would be worth talking about very briefly in-house, in-house developed data collection apps or survey, not just surveys, it would be apps. It would, because it's the technology, the open source and the commercial. We don't have to be exhaustive. We can just give examples. So, and this would require, of course, all of your permission. So we may include this, if not in the first draft discussion paper, in a later draft, but nothing will go out if we have objections from the countries or individuals who've shared their insight. And we'll try to rely as much as we can on public information so that we're also not putting any of our colleagues on the spot in terms of requiring higher level approvals. So if you do have thoughts about this, please let me know. If you have any objections, you can let me know privately. Ismail, I hope you're okay. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I think there's more sensitivity when it comes to private sector engagement. With that, I'm going to keep my closing remarks really, really short. I really appreciate this. I appreciate all of your inputs. I was a bit concerned when we were doing this because it is virtual. If we would generate interesting discussions, I'm really pleased to see that we have. And it makes me doubly glad that we haven't made it a very, very large forum, because I don't think we would have had those discussions. Once we have the draft paper and we share it, I'm going to propose we have a follow-up meeting for anyone who would like sort of another group discussion to go through. Of course, we would first welcome private comments, but having the public discussion also helps to ensure that, we're all on side. So that's, one of our next steps. Of course, we'll continue to take this work forward, use the discussion paper, as I said, once it's validated, reviewed by all of you, to start seeing if we can share it more broadly in other fora, and we can get the we can get some impetus into developing international standards and guidelines on the collection, use, and dissemination of ground truth data. So again, my deepest appreciation to all of you. AIT has been our partner in this. We've had some just excellent relationships, in large part because of the individuals involved. I do want to point out one person for a very specific reason. Dr. Kavinda Gunasekara, who we started these collaborations with, starting with training several years ago, is unfortunately leaving GIC. Although he's not leaving AIT, he's going to head up another group dealing with water-related issues. So we hope that we will still be able to engage GIC and this newly founded group as well in the work that we have going forward. The most important of people, of course, are the presenters and participants. We could not have done this without you. So my heartfelt appreciation to all of you. And with that, I will pass on the mic for some final words from our colleagues at AIT.
Govinda, you're going to...
No, Dr. I was going to invite. Yeah, you can close the meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Sangeeta, and also all colleagues from different parts of the world for this excellent meeting. I think the most beautiful part is that we could learn your experience from different countries. And as Sangeeta suggested, maybe once we compile these things and make some kind of publication, to be very, very useful for all of their members joining. And so I wish that everybody got a lot of insights on this, particularly remote sensing and agriculture, this ground truth data collection, and there's no doubt that they are very intimately connected, and I think this effort should continue. And of course, I mean, my colleague Kavinda left, but I think GIC will continue to collaborate with FAO in future, and we wish to have all the people also have some sort of kind of engagement or collaboration in future. I look forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Govinda, would you like to say any final words before we close the meeting?
No, I think, thank you, everyone. I think especially also including Dr. Dan is here, Frank is been sick, but it's working hard, and Anthony, and then thank you, everyone. And also Sangeeta during our internal discussion, really appreciate your comment, harmonizing statistic into geospatial domain. It is very interesting, and thank you again. So I think as Anthony mentioned in the chat, so we are planning, actually we are constructing several videos that we had experience on field during this activity. So we're trying to make it public, short videos, around 5 videos, and also some other, Sangeeta also suggesting some other expert to bring into one-day training, just not technical training, especially like sharing the materials each other. So that will be, we'll communicate soon. And then that's all to at the end. Thank you, everyone. And Sangeeta, maybe you can officially close.
So again, thank you. I've had some questions about presentations. So I'll be on the website. We can also prepare USB keys and send them out. Of course, it's easier to distribute within Thailand. But for anyone not based in Thailand, if you'd like to get a copy of the presentations, if there's challenges in downloading from websites, please let me know. And we'll see if we can get you a USB key with all of this. So with that said, again, thank you very much. I wish you a very productive day. Thank you, Kapun Ka, and have a wonderful week.